Okay, this video is called Open Letter to Black People. I'm going to tell you a lot of secrets about health. I'm also going to tell you that a Catholic science approach to health is much better than the so-called atheistic establishment method of health. I know at the moment you're probably skeptical. I can tell you with 100% confidence. Wait till you hear what I have to say to you. Double check everything I say. You're going to be amazed at this. You're going to hear the truth. You probably have never heard this in your life. I didn't figure this out. I've been a doctor about 35 years. I didn't figure this out until many years into medicine, until I was sick and my family members were sick. None of this is in conventional textbooks. So here's the first paper. You probably want to hit the print screen button and save this paper the rest of your life because it's really important paper. It's called Blood Pressure in the African Native. It was written by C.P. Donison. The year is 1929. The journal is Lancet. They took 1,800 consecutive adult black men in Kenya and they measured their blood pressure when they were admitted to the hospital. So these patients were sick. They were sick enough to be admitted to a hospital. And out of 1,800, what percent do you think had hypertension? 0. Not a single person had hypertension. If this was in the USA, it'd probably be at least 80% of them were hypertensive, okay? Blacks have hypertension off the charts. And we're going to explain why that is and why that's totally preventable. Okay, they also checked the average blood pressure in a man of 60 years of age from Kenya, a black man from Kenya versus a white guy from Europe. And the average blood pressure in a white guy from Europe was 140/90, mildly hypertensive. The average blood pressure in a man from Kenya in 1929 was 105/67, the same as, a teenager. So blood pressure does not change all through life when you eat a plant-based diet. The population in Kenya at this time was eating a plant-based diet. They don't get hypertension. And the reason I'm telling you all this is like when I was in med school and I graduated first in my class, 99% on my board scores in med school and residency, the highest possible score. I was told black people are just hypertensive. There's nothing you could do. It's genetic. I think it's from Africa, the hot climate. They're salt sensitive. They just retain fluids, high volume status, and they're hypertensive. There's not much you could do. That's all BS. They have 0 hypertension when they eat a plant-based diet. 0, none, nada. Okay, this is important to know because everybody just says nothing you can do, just give them more pills. Instead of giving them 2 pills, give them 3 antihypertensives, hope for the best. Okay. All right, so now I just want to show you the standard textbooks. Medical students still, to this very day, because I teach medical students sometimes, and just this year, a medical student was telling me, they read in their textbook, here's the big Harvard textbook of pathophysiology of heart disease. And I'm going to tell you too, don't be too impressed by these big names, Ivy Leagues, big fancy medical centers. They're all based on selling drugs. And I call this atheism-based medicine. People think you don't need God for science. It's not true. God makes science better. The Catholic Church is where science comes from. Okay, I know the current Catholic Church is messed up and the current Pope is an Antichrist. We're not going to talk about that today. But the real Catholic Church that came from, the first disciples of Christ, it's what developed the modern scientific method. Okay, atheism, modern medicine, it's based on profit. Okay, and the way that works is you match the yield to the pill and you send a bill. And I can tell you, I've gone through all these books backwards and forwards. All the great pioneers of medicine, they're not in the books. They don't put them in the books. They don't want you to know about how you can cure all these diseases. And I'm going to let you see how it works, okay? Here is Christ with the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm also going to tell you, atheism says that life is meaningless. It has no moral foundation. It has no ethics, 0. In atheism, might is right. Survival of the fittest, Darwinism. Do whatever you can get away with. Big money can pay to get whatever it wants and force its rules on everybody else. Christ says, that which you do to the least of my brethren, you do unto me. Be nice to everyone. Man is created in the image of God. Therefore, they're all part divine, and you should not abuse them. Each one's entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay? Christianity gets people to tell the truth and be nice to each other and to do what's right instead of go for the money. All over the world, if you study history, there's almost always some tyrant dictator who says, do what I say or I'll kick your ass, okay? And doesn't let anybody do almost anything, all right? Versus Christianity says, be nice to each other, be nice to everybody, try to get along, okay? And that's what protects the little guy. It says all men are equal in the eyes of God, okay? And you should be nice to them. That gets people to be nice, and it also gets them to tell the truth. So they'll do what's right rather than go for the money, okay? I'm going to show you all the diseases that are common in black people and how almost all of them can be usually prevented, okay? So here's a standard person. It's like walking into a map. You are here. You walk into a museum or something. And basically what the typical person does, 99.9% of people in the Western world, they eat meat, oil, processed foods. They get fat and sick. Then they put them on drugs that don't work. The cure rate for diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease with drugs is 0%. 0%. And then they start saying, well, the drugs failed. Let's put in a stent in your coronaries. Let's do open heart surgery. You got prostate cancer. Let's surgerize your prostate, take it out. Costs tons of money. The patient's bankrupt and dead before 70 and suffers a lot the last 15, 20 years, kind of miserable. That's man's way. It's expensive, it's painful, it doesn't work well. Here's God's way. You eat a plant-based diet. You avoid toxic stuff. Filter your water, for example. Okay? Get some sunshine. Get some exercise. Get your sleep. Practice one of the major religions. Try to get along with other people. That's God's way. It's free. You got to pay for food to eat anyways. And you usually live a lot longer, healthier, and happier. All right, so here is the incidence of stroke in blacks. Very high. Okay. They have tons and tons of stroke because hypertension is a major risk factor for stroke, as are diabetes and obesity. Okay, and so blacks have very, very high rates of stroke. But the good news is, again, that's totally preventable. Then they have very high rates of kidney failure. You walk into any dialysis unit in any hospital in the Western world, and you'll see a bunch of blacks on hypertension, on dialysis due to hypertension. The death rate is 50% within 5 years, about almost 25% the first year. It's real high. So it's no fun being on dialysis about 3 times a week for 5 or more hours, and the death rate's really high. Okay? For hypertension, a disease that's totally preventable. So here is age at diagnosis of hypertension by race and ethnicity. The sort of red is for the blacks. Most common for them in 30, 40 years of age and 50 years of age. And they've got hypertension more than any other group, and they tend to have worse hypertension. Okay, then here's the usual treatment, drug number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, okay? And the drugs don't work. The cure rate with drugs is 0. Okay, you can control it a little bit better, but you really don't reduce the stroke rate that much. What ends up happening is you want to reverse these things as fast as possible. Your ascending thoracic aorta has a lot of elastic fibers that store the kinetic energy of a heart contraction. And the more time goes by that the person's hypertensive, the more damage the ascending thoracic aorta becomes. It's like the second heart. And the less likely you are to fully reverse it. So you want to get going on this, the sooner the better. You got to work with your doctor. And this is just educational material. Work with your doctor to titrate your dosages. Because if you just suddenly change your diet and you take the same old dose of pills, you'll drop your pressure too low. You'll drop your sugar too low if you're on diabetes meds. So that's not safe. I'm just teaching you how it works. You got to work with your doctor to titrate your medicines. What I'm showing you is that it's possible. And it's kind of like what Aristotle said. Aristotle said the storytellers, the bards, the poets were more important than the writers of history, because history just tells you the way things are, the way they've been. Whereas the storyteller, the poet, they teach you how things can be, how they ought to be. So in your mind's eye, you can see the possibilities. So that's what I'm showing you. So here's Kenya, where when they eat a plant-based diet, they eat tons of corn. And you want to eat organic corn, is better than non-organic corn. But in Kenya, they're like the fastest runners in the world. They win the marathon. Like I'm going to show you the next guy is Kipchoge. Kipchoge from Kenya, he won the marathon. He set a world record of less than 2 hours. That's like a miracle, okay, to win the marathon. All right, and so what was he eating? He's eating tons of corn. And I'll show you other runners have had good experience with that. The key is that it's a plant food, okay? And it's not just for blacks or for whites or for any other one particular ethnic group. It's for all ethnic groups. So here is northern Mexico, combined populations were the Tarahumara and the Pima. In 1848, Mexican-American War separated the two populations. Tarahumara stayed in northern Mexico, Sierra Madre Mountains, Copper Canyon area, eating cornmeal and beans and local greens. They're world-famous ultramarathon runners. They can run over 100 miles in 2 days. The Pima population of Mexicans went into Arizona, eats the standard American diet. They're fat and sick with all the Western diets. Tarahumara was eating about 75% carbohydrate, protein 13%, fat 12%. Usually you end up somewhere like 80-10-10. 80% carbohydrate, 10% fat, 10% protein when you eat a plant-based diet. They ate, for plant source of energy, mostly corn, beans, squash. Rarely they ate a little bit of meat. They had no obesity, no one was fat, no hypertension, no diabetes, okay? And it's like this with all populations that eat that way. Here's the same thing with Yanomami. They're like these Indian population in South America in the jungles of the Amazon jungle between Venezuela and Brazil. And they just eat low-fat plant foods, and they don't have any hypertension, none, okay? That's how it pretty much always is. This is my family from Puerto Rico, okay? And I can tell you, the family members who eat processed food and meat and oils, they're fat and sick. And the ones who don't, they're pretty healthy, okay? So I'm just telling you, that's how it is. The genetic, everybody tries to tell you genetics is the key disease. They're full of crap. It's the same for all human populations. All right, so I want you to see this. This is all about what's called leaky gut. And the importance of leaky gut is it's going to be related to autoimmune disease. This is going to be related to forming blood clots. And you want to know this, okay? It's also going to be related to getting cancer, breast cancer and prostate cancer. So normally these smiley face guys are the good bacteria in your gut. They eat fiber. So fiber only comes from plant food. There's no fiber in meat. There's no fiber in oils. The good gut bacteria eat the plant foods. They convert it to butyrate. It's a short-chain fatty acid that's used by the gut lining cells, the enterocytes, for it's the enteric tract is the gut, to make TJs, tight junctions. The tight junctions prevent chemicals from the bacteria called endotoxins like LPS getting across the gut wall. They also prevent the bacteria themselves. So the bad bacteria, I drew them with a frown on their face. This is the bacterial endotoxin. If that gets across the gut wall, it makes your blood more prone to clot. Big chunks of animal protein can also get across the gut wall with a loose junction, a lack of a tight junction, and that causes autoimmune disease. Okay, I show you these things because this leads to tons of people being very sick, and it's easy to prevent. Most of the time it is. Okay, so I'm just showing you, here is estimated systemic lupus erythematosus, autoimmune disease. And the American Indians get a ton of it, but look how common it is in blacks, okay? Super common. It's more common in women than in men, but it's very common in blacks, okay? And this is totally preventable. I've seen tons of black patients with lupus, with multiple sclerosis. Just to give you a little perspective, up until about 1960, they didn't even have any described cases of multiple sclerosis, of rheumatoid arthritis, a very common autoimmune disease in Africa, because they were eating a plant-based diet. Okay, so I want to show you, here's the key difference. So here is processed food. When you process a food, the company has to put it through all these machines. The first thing they do is they smush it. And when they smush it, that's a big deal because inside of a cell is where the good stuff is. The good stuff is the potassium and the magnesium. So when you grind the food down to process it, you grind out the potassium and the magnesium, and then they rinse water over it, they rinse solvents over it, then they add back sugar to make it taste good, and salt to make it taste good, and monosodium glutamate to make it taste good, and then other chemicals as preservatives, and then colorants, and all this stuff is tested to make it taste good, and they often fry it, add emulsifiers to it. All this stuff makes you totally sick. Blacks eat way too much processed food, and that's why they're so sick. There's the mystery right there, and they eat a lot of fried food. There's the mystery. That's it. Okay, and you got to filter water. I'm going to show you how this all works. Now take a look at plant foods. Okay, the cells are intact. These are whole plant foods. This is not processed food. These are whole foods. The cells are intact, so you get all this potassium and magnesium. Those are the good ions. Sodium is the bad one. All right. When you eat this way, you don't get hypertension. You don't get obesity. You don't get diabetes. You don't get heart disease. And the incidence of breast cancer and prostate cancer is minimal, and the risk of fibroids is dramatically minimized as well. So I'm telling you, you're going to notice, no one ever told you this before. I get medical students, including black medical students, and they're so happy. They tell me that they learn more in 2 hours talking to me than they learned in their entire college and med school education. They all routinely say that or admit that. And here's the secret. Your inside cellular cytoplasm has to maintain a fixed concentration of sodium and potassium. So the more salted food you eat, the more you drive up the sodium concentration, which causes your blood vessels, your arteries to contract. It inhibits endothelial nitric oxide. So you end up vasoconstricted, meaning that you have to pump your blood through a narrow vascular system. Pressure has to go up. The second thing is the high-fat diet stick the red blood cells together. The reason you have a blood pressure is to pump blood to the top of your brain, your cerebral cortex. You have to pump that blood against gravity. So if the blood is thick due to high-fat meal, you're pumping a milkshake instead of water to your head, pressure has to go up. If a high-sodium diet, the vessels are constricted, so pressure has to go up to pump through a constricted system. If you eat the whole plant foods, you get the potassium and the magnesium that open up the arteries, so you're pumping through a dilated system. You can pump at lower pressure. And if you eat a low-fat diet, then your blood's thin like water, and so you don't get hypertensive. Those are the big secrets of hypertension right there. Okay, this is just another book by a guy named Roy Taylor, and he showed that if you catch a diabetic within 4 years and you get them to lose the weight and to eat low-fat diets, it's been shown too, you cure all of them because they still have an intact pancreas at that point with type 2 diabetes. Not type 1.5, not type 1, type 2 diabetes, which is about 90% of diabetes. Okay, like Dr. McDougall says, why try to control your diabetes when you can cure it with a healthy diet? Why try to control it with meds that never cure when you can cure it this way? Okay, a little more statistics here. Let's take a look at obesity. Okay, if you look at obesity, and this is blacks right here, non-Hispanic blacks, they've got the highest rate of obesity, especially black women. Okay, non-Hispanic Asian men have a little bit higher obesity than black men, but black women have the highest obesity of any group of people in the USA. Okay. And I'm going to tell you a couple secrets for why that happens. One of them is the same old story. They eat too much processed food. Processed food's designed to taste super good because they put all these flavorants in it, like monosodium glutamate, a brain neurotoxin. It's often fried. It's very high in fat. All of those things make a person gain weight. It also often has estrogenic chemicals in it. Okay, I'll explain how more of this works in just a moment, but it's highly relevant because the same things that cause obesity cause hypertension, diabetes. People who live down south tend to eat more fried food. That causes a much higher rates of obesity in the south. Okay, I want to show you about a black scientist here. This is a guy by the name of Tyrone Hayes. He was at Harvard. Okay, and he discovered that atrazine, the chemical sprayed on non-organic corn, was causing major estrogenic effects. It would turn the young male frog into a female frog. Okay. And so he figured that out. So you think, wow, that's a miraculous, fantastic discovery. He should win a Nobel Prize. No, he pissed off the corporations that spray this stuff on the non-organic food. So they tried to discredit him. They took his funding away. They screwed him over. And he did a good job. He stuck with it. He fought back. He didn't give up, and he didn't agree to discontinue his research. Here he is. You can see the Wikipedia article about him. His name is Tyrone Hayes. Okay, and atrazine is also a mitochondrial inhibitor. Okay. So here's an article about it. Immune and nervous system interaction and endocrine disruptors and their toxicity, the case of atrazine. So not only does atrazine turn a male frog into a female frog, but it also inhibits mitochondria, okay, complex 1 and 3. Meaning that's where you make most of your energy, your ATP. So it drops energy production. Estrogen is a fat storage hormone, so estrogenic chemicals have a tendency to cause obesity. Breast cancer, you get proliferation of breast ductal cells by estrogenic stimulation. Same thing, the prostate's like the male equivalent of the female uterus, so estrogenic chemicals cause the prostate to grow. So what I'm saying is these things both put the prostate at increased risk and the breast at increased risk of cancer. And the main sweetener in processed food is high fructose corn syrup coming from corn. So it's typically sprayed with atrazine. Very often it's purified through chloralkali vat, so it contains mercury in it. So the processed food that you're eating will routinely have atrazine in it, an estrogenic chemical inhibiting your mitochondria, and it'll have, mercury in it with the high fructose corn syrup. And it's going to get worse than that. The protein source will be soy, and soy is also a bad food. Okay, so here's a little bit about breast cancer in women. Blacks have the most breast cancer. Okay. Here is fibroids. Blacks have by far the highest rate of uterine fibroids. And the reason is they got estrogen exposure off the charts, okay? One thing is they'll often use deodorant. Deodorant almost always has 2 estrogens in it. Aluminum is a metalloestrogen, and parabenzoic acid are the preservative of their estrogenic. The breast upper outer quadrant is shared with the armpit, the axilla, in its lymphatics, okay? So what that means is a lot of women especially, they shave their armpits and then they put the deodorant in there, and so you get increased transdermal absormal. The incidence of upper outer quadrant breast cancer used to be about 25% in the 1920s. Now it's about 60%. It's a dramatic increase, and it's thought the main reason for that is the increased exposure to these deodorants. When you walk in a room, you say, hey, how you doing? You don't sniff each other's armpits. By the time you're sniffing each other's armpits, that means you like each other, okay? So you don't need to wear deodorant, okay? And everybody's taught, from TV, it's conformist programming, brainwashing. Oh, I have to wear deodorant. No, you don't. Nobody needs to wear deodorant. I never wear deodorant. I avoid all personal care products. I don't use shampoo or conditioner either. I mean, I don't have any hair, but I've noticed it makes no difference anyways. All I have is this transparent soap with the fewest possible chemicals. I don't use any other personal care products. Every perfume, every cologne, every lotion, every sunscreen, they all have estrogenic preservatives in them. Some of them have 2 or 3 of them. And those things can all have an endocrine effect, increasing your risk potentially of breast cancer, of uterine fibroids, which often cause infertility, lead to hysterectomies, and the hysterectomies cause new medical problems, or increasing the risk of prostate cancer. And they also cost money. Okay, so here is prostate cancer, and the thing to see here, I'll show you this, the graph here. This is not even just prostate cancer. This is death from prostate cancer, okay? Blacks by far have the highest death rate, black men from prostate cancer, okay? And you don't want to believe all these people trying to tell you it's because of racism or something. No, it's because of estrogen exposures. If you blame something on genetics or on race or all this other stuff, then you don't get better. The people in Kenya are really poor, okay? They don't have any money. And they're eating a plant-based diet, and they don't get these diseases, okay? So that's the thing to know. To empower yourself is be aware there's a lot you could do. Now, this is a research study done over at the Mayo Clinic, and it's about women who have a hysterectomy at a young age. When women have a hysterectomy at younger than 35 years of age, they have a dramatically, like almost 5 times increased risk of congestive heart failure. They'll have a dramatically increased risk of dementia. And this is a big study, over 2,000 patients. Okay, this is an OB-GYN lady over at Mayo Clinic. And the reason I'm showing you this is tons of black women. I've had black women tell me every single woman in their family had to get a hysterectomy before 35 years of age due to fibroids. And I'm like, well, what can you learn from that? Avoid all these estrogenic chemicals. You have to filter your tap water, at least with a carbon filter, to remove all the standard estrogenic chemicals. To get the aluminum out, it's nice to also have reverse osmosis, okay? Because whenever I see a demented female, let's say a demented black female, or any demented female, less than 60 years of age, this is what, if they're, a smoker, a drinker, a drug addict or something, okay, fine, that will be the cause. But if they're not, I always immediately check if they had a hysterectomy at a young age, and that's almost always what it is. Because then they get hypertensive. Because when you're menstruating, you're lowering your hematocrit, your red blood cell count, and that lowers your blood pressure. It also makes your blood cells younger. Here's another paper. Hysterectomy associated with dementia, especially when it's done at a young age. Okay, now here's the other thing that has to do with why you got to eat the plant foods if you want to be healthy. Like I said, I used to think vegans were, like hippies or, pot smoking wimps with a Grateful Dead t-shirt, and I used to think it was just weird craziness. But I've learned, I'm just interested in the vegan diet for health. I could care less about animal rights. I mean, I want people to be nice to animals, but what I'm trying to say is it's not my focus. My focus is health. And so here's what goes on with estrogen excretion from the human body. Estrogen goes into the liver, where it's then processed by the liver and undergoes what's called conjugation, and a chemical called glucuronic acid is added to it. That's called conjugation glucuronidation. It's then excreted into the bile by the liver. It passes into the intestinal tract, into the colon, and then we defecate it out of our bodies, and that's how we lower our body estrogen level. And that protects you from prostate cancer and breast cancer and obesity and fibroids. Well, what happens is if you don't eat enough plant food, instead of having the good gut bacteria that protect you from leaky gut, which we spoke about a moment ago with regard to autoimmune disease and clotting in the blood, you get the bad bacteria. The bad bacteria are the ones that proliferate when you don't have dietary fiber. And they have an enzyme that the good bacteria don't have very much of called glucuronidase. And that will cut this connection between the E for estrogen and the glucuronic acid. Once the estrogen is free by itself, not bound to glucuronic acid, it'll be reabsorbed into the blood, so estrogen levels go up. So people who don't eat enough dietary fiber, don't eat enough plant foods, whole plant foods, they get high estrogen levels, which increases the risk of prostate cancer, increases the risk of breast cancer. So that's what you have to know. You have to filter your water or you're screwed. And most people don't know this are drinking tap water, which is a big mistake. Municipal water filtration companies, they don't remove all these estrogenic chemicals. And you got to eat that dietary fiber to protect yourself. Now here's the other thing too. Routine municipal water supplies, the vast majority of them in the Western world, they put fluoride in your water. Fluoride's a poison, okay? It's toxic to a man's sperm. It lowers his sperm count, lowers his fertility. It's toxic to the brain. It lowers IQ. It makes the population more docile. And it's in, let's not even talk about why it's in the water, but it's in the water. It's also combined with aluminum in the water, a so-called clearing agent. But aluminum's a major brain toxin, and it's a testicular gonadal toxin too. So you don't want this stuff, okay? The routine filters of, carbon filters are good for removing most estrogenic chemicals, but they're not that good at removing fluoride. They're not that good at removing aluminum. So ideally, you'd like reverse osmosis for your drinking water. Okay, carbon filter is good enough for most other things, but for drinking water, ideally, you would want reverse osmosis. These are secrets of health. Now, here is a little bit more information on soy. There'll be some people who tell you, oh, soy doesn't have all these estrogenic problems. Take a look at the guy writing the paper. He's the head of the Soy Institute. They promote soy, okay? So when people quote you these papers funded by the same industry that makes the product, you can expect the results are exaggerated. And then soy is routinely sprayed with glyphosate, which is a neurotoxin. It's an excitotoxin in the brain of the NMDA receptor, the glutamate receptor. It's routinely processed with hexane, another neurotoxin, causes brain damage, lowers IQ. It's very high in fat, around 40% of calories from fat. So that means it's going to be contributing to high blood pressure and to weight gain. It's very high in estrogenic chemicals, okay? The other thing, too, is one of the things you'll hear people trying to say soy is real healthy. What happens is a lot of populations, when they first start drinking more soy milk, they cut down on dairy. And dairy is even worse. So soy is better than dairy, but they're both bad. You really don't want to ingest any of them. I won't ever ingest anything from an animal. I'm 100% vegan. I'm 62 years of age. I don't have any chronic medical problems. And I'll never eat soy, okay, for all these reasons. Okay, actually, that's all I've got. And so I just wanted you to see that the healthiest diet you could eat is low fat, low sodium, 100% vegan. You can see I got lots of videos that go into more detail about everything I talked about in this talk. But I'm just trying to show you. Here's the truth. It's not in any of the medical books. I know the medical books backwards and forwards. Double check everything I say. John McDougall is considered the greatest doctor who ever lived. You can check everything he's going to say. There won't be a single contradiction between him and me. Check Walter Kempner, the other guy considered one of the greatest doctors who ever lived. You won't see a contradiction between myself and him or McDougall. Okay, I'm the third in line, so I can provide you with more detail. But you'll see it's all true, and that's the case. And then look at the epidemiology. You see all these populations where they eat old-fashioned plant-based diets. They don't get hypertension. They don't get diabetes. They don't get coronary artery disease. They have next to nothing for autoimmune disease. They have hardly any breast cancer, hardly any prostate cancer. So there's the answer. God's way, Genesis 1:29. I have put every plant on this earth that shall be food for you. So I hope you found that helpful.